So today I want to explore how we value ourselves. I think there's a real tendency to look outside of ourselves to determine our value. And then, of course, we succumb to the values of our current culture. If you look at what our culture values, it often values physical attractiveness. It might value the house that you live in. It might value the car that you drive. And in short, it values status. And this status is determined by our culture. And if you're watching this video, there's a high likelihood that your values have evolved beyond our culture's values. So again, this creates a bit of a conflict because we're valuing one thing and yet people are responding to us from a different set of values. So it's likely that our internal values that we've established through our own, spiritual evolution, I guess you could say, or our human evolution, our values have evolved, and we may value openness and honesty and integrity. And then when we interact with the world, we interact with people in the world, we're getting a different feedback because, there's a different value system in our culture. So if we look outside of ourselves to establish our value, we're going to get an evaluation based on our culture's values rather than our values. When we get really honest, I think this status and these external values are more powerful than we think. So what it really requires is going inside. At some point we need to go inside and ask ourselves, well, what do I value? We need to take yet another look at what I value. But I think it's important that your value system be your point of reference. So if you're trying to find value in yourself, it only makes sense that you start with your own values as a reference. You're going to measure your value, according to your standards of value, rather than evaluating it in relation to the values of our culture, which we've established are likely discrepant or different than what yours have become. So then if I value honesty, I can find value in me being honest, and I can evaluate myself based on my standards. So it's like if I act dishonest, being the human being that I am, say I'm whatever this experience triggers something in me that has me be dishonest, well then I can say, okay, well, that was me not being true to my values. That was, I was dishonest. Or if I was really honest, or say I was really vulnerable, and I chose to be honest in a way that was not real flattering in terms of where I exposed how I was really sensitive, or I exposed what I was feeling, then it's just like, okay, that there's value. I value vulnerability and I was vulnerable. Therefore, I have value. My value is, there's value in my vulnerability. Okay. And then I'm finding out that and so I'm like deciding that my value is in being vulnerable. So then if I look to, am I valuable? To what extent am I valuable? I'm using a standard that's based on my values. So then when I seek to find value in myself, I'm looking from my standards and my notions of value rather than those of my culture. Okay, so then I can, if I'm honest, that is valuable. If I'm vulnerable, that is valuable. Okay, and that has to make sense for me, right? Because it's like, okay, if I'm vulnerable, then that, and I'm open, then that encourages other people to be open. Okay, and then there was value in creating openness, which I value. If I'm honest, okay, or say I speak my truth, then that has an effect because people hear my truth and it might encourage them to speak truth. And so then my speaking truth, my behavior of speaking truth, my action of speaking truth had value because it affected another person and it encouraged them to speak their truth. So then I'm creating valuable. You could say I'm valuable because I spoke my truth. And then it's just like, oh, I am valuable. Versus if I speak my truth and then I look outside of myself to our culture and it's just like, well, that's all good, but you're not very hot. You're not hot in the way that our culture has determined physical beauty or physical attractiveness. So therefore you're not valuable. Okay. And so I look to that, I'm going to be not valuable. But if I look, it's like, hold on here. I spoke my truth and that allowed other people to speak their truth. Okay. That is valuable. That created value to another human being. It could be argued, so is me being physically attracted, how valuable is that? I guess it's, if I'm physical attractive, it's nicer for other people to look at, you could argue, but is it really making a difference, which is part of my value, right? My value is to make a difference, to have a more open, to have a more purposeful life, and to have a more life based on honesty and truth. And so therefore, so if I'm speaking truth, then that is valuable. Okay, and I would argue possibly even more valuable than being cool or more valuable of being attractive. Not that there's anything wrong with those things, but I think it creates a problem when we evaluate ourselves on their basis, because then it's always in the eye of the beholder too. So I'm like basing my value on how other people evaluate me, and much better to just, why not evaluate myself based on my values, and that's what I would invite you to do, is to just spend some time. You may know this already. Spend some time and establish, what your values are, and then look at how you walk through the world. And hopefully you walk through the world in a way that lives these values, and then that creates value for other people, much like the example of speaking truth did. Okay, so then therefore I can look to myself and saying, hold on here, I am valuable. So anyway, if you like this video, please subscribe to my YouTube channel or forward it to people. I appreciate that. I appreciate you watching this video. I hope you have a really valuable day.